Hey, Pastor Steve Waldron. I hope you're having a great day or night in Jesus. Thank you so much for being with us. We're going to be looking, is there a gap between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2, otherwise known as the gap theory. So thanks for being here. Been using off and on for a few weeks now, Creation versus Evolution by Dr. Arlo C. Molenpaugh, incredible chemist, great scientist, and he's gone on to his reward. One of the best books, probably the best introductory book I've ever read on the subject of creation versus evolution. So we just use it kind of as a discussion starter. So let's get started on this. And so let's just go into it. The gap theory, we'll just read a little bit, discuss, was another attempt by theologians to short-scale world history found in Genesis with the popular belief that geologists had positive evidence that the world is very old. Thomas Chalmers, 1847, a Scottish theologian and the first moderator of the Free Church of Scotland, probably was the person most responsible for the origin of the gap theory. Thomas Chalmers is his name. Currently, this idea is also known as ruin reconstruction view, and Schofield and Dake, their study Bibles, push this. And so I think Pember had a book in like 1876 on it as well. So here is the gap theory summarized. In the beginning, God created a perfect heaven and earth. This original creation of the universe was followed by billions of years of evolutionary development. Satan was ruler over the earth, which was peopled by a race of men without any souls. Eventually, Satan, who dwelled in the Garden of Eden, composed of minerals, rebelled by desiring to become like God. Because of Satan's fall, sin entered the universe, and God judged the earth by means of a flood. This would be Genesis 1:2. And then a global ice age where light and heat were somehow removed. All the plant, animal, and human fossils upon earth today date from Lucifer's flood and don't bear any relationship to plants and animals upon the earth today. Now, I will say, obviously, that's objectively not true, because wherever we find fossils today, it looks like what we have today. Sometimes much larger, but still the same, like massive dragonflies and the like. And so a gap theorist would want to translate the first part of Genesis 1:2 to read, and the earth became without form and void, but the earth became ruined and empty. And so they would say there was a large gap between Genesis 1:1 and 1:2. This would be enough to account for the geologic ages. And basically, to me, just another attempt like theistic evolution to try to merge evolutionary theory with Scripture. They would propose that God reshaped the earth and created all life in 6 literal days after Lucifer's flood, which produced the fossils, hence the name ruin reconstruction. One of the arguments for the gap theory is the Hebrew word bara and asa always have different meaning. Hebrew words, I should have said. They allege that asa cannot mean to create. However, there are a number of verses where the word asa does mean to create, such as Nehemiah 9 and 6. Many gapists advocate that the grammar of Genesis 1:1 and 2 allows and even requires a gap of time between what is recorded in verse 1 and verse 2. I think John Lennox goes along with that. Dr. Raymond Crownover, who I've heard him speak before, said this: in Hebrews, there's a grammatical construction known as the wa consecutive. This construction links two or more verbs by appending the Hebrew letter wa in the second and succeeding verbs. The King James Version, this construction is translated and, but although it's connective, it also presents the idea of consecutive action. That is, each of the verbs connected by the wa consecutive also understood to take place consecutively during the same time period. Both verses 2 and 3 of Genesis 1 begin with the wa consecutive construction, tying these verses to verse 1 as occurring during the same period without any gap of time. So this would be in the beginning. Remember, even Jesus said from the beginning of creation it wasn't so, and he's talking about Genesis 1. So no large gap of time. Obviously, Genesis 1:28 is used when it says replenish the earth, but in King James Day that just meant to fill. So what are some biblical arguments against the gap theory? So he does a good job listing these. There's no scriptural evidence that Lucifer's fall produced a flood. There's no mention of Lucifer's flood anywhere in the Bible. Some would say Jeremiah 4:23 through 28, but that doesn't mention it at all. The idea that fossils formed before the reconstruction of the earth contradicts the fact that there was no death before Adam's sin, Romans 5:12, which I think is a very important point. This theory proposes that men existed before Adam, while the Bible states the first man, Adam, 1 Corinthians 15:45. If fossils were produced by Lucifer's flood, then what effect did Noah's flood have? Noah's flood would have removed all traces of the fossil record, unless it was a local flood. Could God have summarized everything he made as very good if Lucifer had already fallen and there was death and destruction due to Lucifer's flood? Exodus 20:11 says, "For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them." Where's there time for a gap? And lastly, number 7, the gap theory does not resolve the problem of evolution, but merely pushes it back into a pre-Genesis world. This theory implies that God used evolutionary methods in the pre-world and then changed to direct creative activity in the first 6 days of recreation. Again, some people would say the first 2 or 3 days of creation are expansive days, but then beginning with day 3 usually, and on forward it would be 24-hour days. And he goes into why he believes in 6 literal days of creation, but we're going to go into that next video. So God bless you. Talk with you later. Share with your friends, family, church family. Subscribe. Please hit the bell notification. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.